The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the Pentagon briefing room as Lieutenant Commander Maya Chen stood at attention near the back wall. Her dress uniform was crisp, every ribbon perfectly aligned, but she might as well have been invisible. The 27 senior officers gathered around the mahogany table were engaged in heated discussion about the crisis unfolding halfway around the world, and not one of them had acknowledged her presence since she'd entered the room 15 minutes ago. Maya had been summoned from her desk job at Naval Intelligence with exactly 30 minutes' notice. No explanation, no briefing materials, just a terse message on her secure phone telling her to report to Conference Room 4 Alpha immediately. She'd straightened her uniform, grabbed her tablet, and hurried through the maze of corridors, her heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and hope. After 8 years in the Navy, Maya had grown accustomed to being overlooked. At 5'3", with a slight build and a quiet demeanor, she didn't fit the image most people had of a warrior. She'd spent the last 3 years behind a desk, analyzing satellite imagery and communications intercepts, watching other officers receive commendations for operations that relied on her intelligence work. Her name never appeared in the reports. Her contributions were always classified, always anonymous, always forgotten. Admiral Richard Hawthorne stood at the head of the table, his weathered face grim as he studied the tactical display on the wall screen. At 62, Hawthorne was a legend in the special operations community. He'd commanded SEAL teams in 3 different wars, and his reputation for getting his people home alive was unmatched. The Navy Cross on his uniform testified to his valor under fire. "The situation is deteriorating rapidly," Hawthorne said, his gravelly voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. "We have 12 American aid workers trapped in a compound in the Kandahar province. Taliban forces have them surrounded. The Afghan military can't or won't intervene, and we have a narrow window before those hostages are moved to a location we can't reach." A colonel from the Joint Special Operations Command leaned forward. "Sir, we have 2 SEAL teams on standby in Kabul, but the intelligence package is thin. We don't have current imagery of the compound. We don't know the exact number of hostiles, and our communications intercepts are 3 days old. Sending our people in blind is asking for a massacre." Hawthorne's jaw tightened. "I'm aware of the risks, Colonel. That's why we need better intelligence, and we need it in the next 6 hours. The President wants options on his desk by morning." Maya's fingers moved across her tablet screen, pulling up the files she'd been reviewing just that morning. She'd been tracking unusual communications patterns in that exact region for the past week. The intercepts had seemed routine at first, but something about the timing and frequency had triggered her instincts. She'd flagged them for further analysis, but her supervisor had dismissed her concerns. Now those same communications were taking on a different meaning in her mind. The pieces were falling into place like a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving. She took a half-step forward, then hesitated. The room was full of senior officers, most of them men with decades of combat experience. Who was she to interrupt? But the lives of 12 civilians hung in the balance, and she had information that might save them. Maya cleared her throat softly. No one seemed to hear. She tried again, a bit louder this time. Admiral Hawthorne's eyes flickered in her direction, then dismissed her just as quickly. He turned back to the tactical display. "We need satellite coverage of that compound within 3 hours. I want thermal imaging, structural analysis, and—" "Admiral, sir." Maya's voice was steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I may have relevant intelligence on the situation." The room fell silent. 27 pairs of eyes turned toward her, and Maya felt the weight of their collective scrutiny. Some of the gazes were curious, most were skeptical, a few were openly hostile. Hawthorne's expression was unreadable. "And you are?" "Lieutenant Commander Maya Chen, sir, Naval Intelligence. I was assigned to this briefing by Admiral Morrison's office." A major sitting near the middle of the table let out a barely suppressed snort. Maya recognized him from the cafeteria. He'd never spoken to her directly, but she'd overheard him making jokes about paper pushers more than once. Hawthorne studied her for a long moment. Lieutenant Commander Chen, I don't recall requesting an intelligence analyst for this briefing. No, sir. Admiral Morrison thought my current work might be relevant to the situation. And what exactly have you been working on that would be relevant to a hostage rescue operation in Afghanistan? Maya pulled up the files on her tablet, her fingers surprisingly steady despite her nervousness. For the past 8 days, I've been monitoring a pattern of encrypted communications originating from 3 locations in the Kandahar province. The encryption is Taliban-associated, but the communication pattern is unusual. Instead of the typical decentralized chatter, these messages have been highly coordinated, suggesting a planned operation. The colonel from JSOC leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. We've been monitoring Taliban communications for 20 years, Commander. What makes your analysis special? Maya met his gaze without flinching. Sir, I've been analyzing communications patterns in this region for 3 years. I've developed a database of over 14,000 intercepted messages, cross-referenced with known operations and outcomes. The current pattern matches the signature of 2 previous hostage situations, both of which resulted in the captives being moved to secondary locations within 36 hours of capture. That's interesting speculation, the colonel said, his tone suggesting it was anything but. But speculation doesn't give us actionable intelligence. It's not speculation, sir. Maya touched her tablet screen, and the wall display changed to show a map overlaid with communication data. Based on the frequency and timing of the intercepts, I can identify 3 probable locations where the hostages are being held, and I can predict with 78% confidence which location they'll be moved to if they're transferred. A captain near the end of the table spoke up. 78%? That's not exactly a sure thing, sweetheart. We don't risk SEAL lives on 3/4 certainty. The casual condescension in his voice made Maya's cheeks burn, but she kept her expression neutral. No, sir, but 78% is significantly better than the 0% confidence we have right now. Admiral Hawthorne held up a hand, silencing the murmur of conversation that had started around the table. He studied the display Maya had put up, his eyes moving across the data points with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent a lifetime making life-and-death decisions based on incomplete information. Walk me through your analysis, Commander. For the next 20 minutes, Maya presented her findings. She explained the communication patterns, the geographic clustering of the signals, the timing correlations with previous Taliban operations. She highlighted the anomalies that had first caught her attention and showed how they connected to known safe houses and supply routes. Some of the officers around the table began asking questions, and Maya answered each one with precision and confidence. She knew this material inside and out. This was her domain, and for the first time in years, people were actually listening to her. When she finished, Admiral Hawthorne was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to his operations officer. Get the satellite retasked. I want confirmation on those 3 locations within 2 hours, and contact the SEAL teams in Kabul. Tell them to start mission planning based on Commander Chen's analysis. Maya felt a surge of relief and pride, but it was short-lived. The major who'd snorted earlier leaned forward. Admiral, with all due respect, we're going to plan a special operations mission based on the hunches of a desk jockey who's never been in combat. That seems like a pretty big leap. Hawthorne's eyes narrowed. That desk jockey just provided us with more actionable intelligence than your entire J2 shop has produced in the last 48 hours, Major, unless you have a better analysis to present. The Major's face reddened, but he said nothing. Commander Chen, Hawthorne said, turning back to Maya, you'll remain with this task force for the duration of the operation. We're going to need your expertise as the situation develops. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. As the meeting continued, Maya returned to her position near the wall, but now several officers were glancing at her with new interest. Not all the looks were friendly. She'd embarrassed the major in front of everyone, and she could see the resentment in his eyes. The briefing lasted another hour, with Maya contributing additional insights when asked. By the time Admiral Hawthorne dismissed everyone, a mission plan was taking shape. If the satellite imagery confirmed Maya's analysis, the SEAL teams would launch before dawn. As the room emptied, the major paused near Maya. His name tag read Harrison. "Enjoy your moment, Chen," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "But when this goes sideways, it's going to be on you. I hope you can live with that." He walked away before Maya could respond, leaving her alone in the empty conference room with his words echoing in her mind. She looked at the tactical display still glowing on the wall screen. Somewhere in Afghanistan, 12 people were counting on her analysis to save their lives. And if she was wrong, if her confidence in the data was misplaced, American soldiers would be walking into an ambush. Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She'd spent 8 years being invisible, being ignored, being dismissed. Now, finally, people were listening to her, but with that recognition came responsibility heavier than any she'd ever carried. She gathered her tablet and headed for the door. There was work to do, and the clock was ticking. The Joint Operations Center was alive with controlled chaos when Maya arrived at 0300 hours. Multiple screens displayed satellite feeds, communication intercepts, and real-time tactical data. Analysts sat at workstations, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of monitors, while senior officers clustered around a central planning table covered in maps and mission documents. Maya had been awake for 22 hours straight, surviving on black coffee and adrenaline. After the initial briefing, she'd spent the evening refining her analysis, cross-referencing new satellite imagery with her communications data, and providing updates to the mission planners. The satellite confirmation had come through just after midnight. 2 of her 3 predicted locations showed signs of recent activity consistent with a hostage situation. Admiral Hawthorne stood at the planning table with his operations team, his eyes fixed on the latest imagery. He looked up as Maya approached. "Commander Chen, good you're here. We've got a decision to make." Maya moved to the table, where high-resolution satellite photos showed 2 compounds in stark detail. Both were small fortified structures typical of the region, with thick walls and minimal windows. The thermal imaging shows heat signatures consistent with 15 to 20 people at this location, Hawthorne said, pointing to the first compound. At the second location, we're reading 8 to 10. Your analysis suggested the first location was the most probable. Yes, sir, Maya confirmed. Based on the communications pattern and the proximity to known Taliban supply routes, the first compound has an 82% probability of being the primary holding location. A Navy captain Maya hadn't met before spoke up. But we can't confirm which heat signatures are hostages and which are captors. If we hit the wrong location, we lose the element of surprise, and the hostages at the real location could be executed. It was the nightmare scenario, and everyone in the room knew it. "What about the third location you identified?" Hawthorne asked Maya. She pulled up the latest satellite imagery on her tablet. "No thermal activity at all, sir, but that doesn't mean it's not significant. In my analysis of previous operations, the Taliban sometimes keep secondary locations cold until they're ready to move prisoners. It's a security measure." Major Harrison, who'd been standing off to the side, moved closer to the table. "So we could be looking at a shell game. They might not even have the hostages at any of these locations anymore." Maya shook her head. "The communications intercepts say otherwise, sir. As of 4 hours ago, there was still active chatter referencing the package and coordination for movement tomorrow afternoon. They're still there." "You're gambling American lives on intercepts and patterns," Harrison said. That's not intelligence. That's guesswork. Before Maya could respond, Hawthorne cut in. Major, Commander Chen's analysis has been more accurate than anything else we've received. Unless you have contradictory intelligence to present, I suggest you keep your editorial comments to yourself. Harrison's jaw clenched, but he stepped back. Hawthorne turned to his SEAL team commander, who was participating via secure video link from Kabul. Commander Ellis, what's your assessment? On the screen, a lean man in his 40s with intense eyes considered the question. Sir, my teams are ready to execute on either target. Based on the intelligence we have, I'd recommend we hit the first location that Commander Chen identified. The higher number of heat signatures suggests that's our best shot. We go in fast, extract the hostages, and exfil before the enemy can react. And if the hostages aren't there, someone asked. Ellis's expression was grim. Then we've lost our window and we're back to square one. But sitting here debating probabilities isn't going to save those people. We need to make a call and execute. Hawthorne was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful. Then he looked directly at Maya. Commander Chen, I need you to give me your best assessment, not the percentages, not the analysis. Your gut. Where are those hostages? The weight of the question settled on Maya's shoulders. Around the room, everyone was watching her. This was the moment where her career would be defined. Get it right, and she'd proven herself as an intelligence officer. Get it wrong, and people would die. She thought about the patterns she'd studied, the thousands of hours she'd spent analyzing communications, the instincts she'd developed over 3 years of painstaking work. Then she thought about the 12 aid workers who'd gone to Afghanistan to help people, who were now terrified and alone, waiting for rescue that might never come. The first compound, sir, Maya said, her voice steady. That's where they are. Hawthorne nodded slowly. All right, Commander Ellis, you have a go for the operation. Execute as planned. The room burst into activity as the final mission preparations began. Maya watched the screens as the SEAL teams began their movement, her stomach tight with anxiety. There was no going back now. The next 2 hours passed with agonizing slowness. Maya monitored the communications intercepts, looking for any sign that the Taliban had detected the approaching American forces. The chatter remained normal, discussing routine matters, nothing that suggested they knew what was coming. At 05:15, Commander Ellis's voice came through the speakers. All elements in position, proceeding with assault. The operations center fell silent. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the screens showing the drone feed from above the target compound. In the grainy infrared imagery, Maya could see the SEAL team moving into position around the compound's perimeter, silent shadows against the pale walls. Then the explosion as they breached the door, the flash of stun grenades, the sudden burst of thermal signatures as the team poured inside. For 90 seconds, there was nothing but the sound of radio traffic, terse and professional, calling out room clearances and status updates. Then Ellis's voice, slightly breathless. Jackpot. We have 12 hostages all alive. I repeat, all 12 hostages secured. The operations center erupted in cheers and applause. Maya felt her knees go weak with relief. They'd been right. Her analysis had been right. Admiral Hawthorne turned to her with something that might have been a smile. Well done, Commander. But the celebration was premature. 30 seconds later, Ellis's voice came through again, urgent this time. Contact. We've got vehicles approaching from the east, multiple armed personnel. We need immediate air support. The drone feed showed trucks racing toward the compound, kicking up dust in the pre-dawn darkness. Someone had called in reinforcements, and the SEAL team was about to be outnumbered. How did they know? Someone shouted. We had total surprise. Maya's mind raced. She pulled up the communications intercepts from the last hour, scanning them frantically. Then she saw it. A brief message sent just 3 minutes before the assault began. It had been encoded differently from the others, using a pattern she hadn't flagged in her analysis. "They had a sentry we didn't account for," Maya said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Someone saw the team approaching and got a message out." "Can we get air support to Ellis?" Hawthorne demanded. The air operations officer shook his head. "Sir, our nearest attack birds are 15 minutes out. The team doesn't have 15 minutes." On the screen, the approaching trucks were visible now, less than a mile from the compound. The SEAL team was outgunned and trapped with 12 civilians to protect. Maya stared at the tactical display, her mind working furiously. Then she saw it, the second compound, the one they hadn't hit. It was less than 2 miles from the first location, and according to the satellite imagery, it was abandoned. "Commander Ellis," Maya said, speaking directly into the communications channel for the first time. "There's an abandoned compound 1.7 miles northwest of your position. If you can reach it before the enemy vehicles arrive, you can fort up there and wait for air support." There was a pause, then Ellis's voice, "How do you know it's abandoned?" "Thermal imaging shows no activity, sir, and it's a more defensible position than your current location." Another pause, longer this time. Maya could imagine Ellis weighing the options, knowing that trusting the intelligence of someone he'd never met could get his entire team killed. "Roger that," Ellis finally said. "We're moving. All elements prepare to exfil with precious cargo. We're heading northwest to secondary position." On the drone feed, Maya watched as the SEAL team organized the hostages and began moving out of the compound, using the darkness and the remaining minutes before the enemy arrived. They moved fast, the hostages stumbling but keeping pace, driven by the knowledge that their lives depended on speed. The enemy trucks reached the first compound just as the SEAL team disappeared over a ridge. Through the drone feed, Maya could see the armed men dismounting, moving into the compound, finding it empty. There was confusion, angry gestures, men running in different directions. "They're searching," the drone operator reported, "but they haven't spotted our team yet." The SEAL team reached the second compound 8 minutes later. Ellis's voice came through. "Confirmed, position is clear, setting up defensive perimeter." 5 minutes after that, the attack helicopters arrived, and the enemy vehicles were destroyed in quick succession. The rescue was complete. As the sun rose over Afghanistan, the SEAL team and the 12 hostages were safely aboard helicopters heading back to Kabul. The operations center staff began standing down, exhausted but elated by the successful mission. Admiral Hawthorne approached Maya, his expression thoughtful. "That was quick thinking with the alternate compound, Commander. You may have saved a lot of lives tonight." "Thank you, sir. I've been doing this for a long time," Hawthorne said quietly, "and I've learned that good intelligence officers are rarer than good warriors. You have a gift for this work." Maya felt a warmth in her chest at the praise, but before she could respond, Major Harrison appeared at Hawthorne's elbow. "Admiral, we need to discuss the security breach," Harrison said. "Someone leaked information about this operation. That's the only way the Taliban could have had reinforcements ready to respond so quickly." Hawthorne's expression darkened. "What are you suggesting, Major?" Harrison glanced at Maya. "I'm suggesting we need to investigate everyone who had access to the mission details, including Commander Chen." The accusation hung in the air like poison. Maya felt her face flush with anger and humiliation. "That's absurd," she said. "I would never." "You're the one who provided the intelligence," Harrison continued, his voice taking on a tone of false reasonableness. "You're the one who knew exactly where we'd be hitting, and conveniently, the enemy showed up right after we secured the hostages. Maybe you wanted to make yourself look like a hero by saving the team from a situation you helped create." "Major Harrison, that's enough," Hawthorne said sharply. But the damage was done. Maya could see the doubt flickering in the eyes of some of the other officers in the room. The celebration of the successful rescue had been poisoned by suspicion. "Sir, I had nothing to do with any leak," Maya said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I've served this country with honor for 8 years." "Then you won't mind submitting to a security investigation," Harrison said, "unless you have something to hide." Maya looked at Admiral Hawthorne, hopping for support, but his expression had become carefully neutral. He was a political animal as much as a warrior, and she could see him calculating the risks of defending her too strongly. "Commander Chen, you're relieved of duty pending a security review," Hawthorne said quietly. "Please surrender your credentials and any classified materials in your possession." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. "Sir, please." "This is for your protection as much as anything else, Commander. We need to investigate this properly, and we can't do that if there are questions about your access to ongoing operations." Maya wanted to argue, to fight, to demand justice. But she was a naval officer, and she'd been given a direct order. She removed her security badge and placed it on the table, along with her tablet. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice hollow. As she walked out of the operations center, Maya could feel the eyes on her back. The officers who'd applauded her analysis just hours ago were now watching her leave in disgrace, wondering if she was a traitor. She'd spent 8 years being invisible, overlooked, and dismissed. For one brief, shining moment, she'd been recognized for her abilities, had made a difference, had saved lives. And now, just as quickly, she was being cast aside again, but this time with her honor and her career in ruins. Maya sat in her small apartment in Arlington, staring at her phone as the hours crawled past. It had been 3 days since she'd been relieved of duty, and in that time she'd heard nothing from the Navy. No formal charges, no interview by investigators, just silence, which somehow felt worse than any accusation. She tried calling her supervisor at Naval Intelligence, but he hadn't returned her messages. Her security clearance had been suspended, her access to military facilities revoked. She was in limbo, unable to work but not formally accused of anything, her career and reputation hanging by a thread. The news coverage of the hostage rescue had been extensive. The 12 aid workers had been safely returned to their families, and the operation was being hailed as a textbook example of precision special operations. But Maya's name appeared nowhere in the reports. The intelligence work that had made the rescue possible was attributed to a dedicated team of analysts with no specifics. It was as if she'd never been there at all. On the 4th morning, Maya's phone finally rang. The caller ID showed a Navy number she didn't recognize. "Lieutenant Commander Chen," she answered, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Commander Chen, this is Captain Patricia Morrison from the Judge Advocate General's office. I've been assigned to represent you in the security investigation." Maya sat up straighter. "Captain, I appreciate that, but I haven't been charged with anything. Do I need a lawyer?" "You haven't been formally charged yet," Morrison said carefully. "But Major Harrison has filed a detailed report alleging that you may have compromised operational security. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service is treating this as a serious matter." The room seemed to spin. NCIS. This wasn't just an administrative review anymore. This was a criminal investigation. "Captain Morrison, I didn't leak anything," Maya said, fighting to keep the panic out of her voice. "I would never betray my country." "I believe you, Commander, but we need to prove it. Can you meet me at my office this afternoon? We need to go through everything that happened in the lead-up to the operation." Maya agreed and spent the next few hours reviewing every action she'd taken, every communication she'd sent, every file she'd accessed. By the time she arrived at Morrison's office, she had a timeline written out in meticulous detail. Captain Morrison was a sharp-eyed woman in her early 50s with graying hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent her career fighting bureaucratic battles. She listened to Maya's account without interruption, taking notes on a legal pad. When Maya finished, Morrison leaned back in her chair. The problem we have is that Major Harrison's theory isn't completely unreasonable from an investigative standpoint. You did have early access to the operational details. The Taliban response was unusually fast and well coordinated, and you're relatively junior, which fits a certain profile of personnel vulnerable to recruitment by foreign intelligence. I'm not a traitor, Maya said firmly. I know that, but proving it is going to be difficult. The NCIS investigation is focused on finding the source of the leak, and right now, you're their primary suspect. Morrison paused. There's something else you should know. Major Harrison has been very active in spreading his theory. There are rumors circulating at the Pentagon that you may have been compromised by Chinese intelligence. Maya felt sick. That's ridiculous. I haven't had any contact with Chinese intelligence. My family left China when I was 3 years old. I barely speak Mandarin. It doesn't matter whether it's true, Morrison said gently. What matters is that people are talking about it. Your reputation is being destroyed, and unless we can identify the real source of the leak, the cloud of suspicion is going to follow you for the rest of your career. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of injustice pressing down on her. She'd done everything right. She'd provided brilliant analysis that had saved lives, and now she was being punished for it. What do I do? She asked quietly. We cooperate fully with the investigation and hope they find the real leak. In the meantime, you keep your head down and don't talk to anyone about the case. Over the next 2 weeks, Maya was interviewed 3 times by NCIS agents. They went through her computer, her phone records, her financial statements. They asked about her family, her friends, her travel history. Every aspect of her life was scrutinized and found wanting. The isolation was devastating. Most of her colleagues from naval intelligence stopped returning her calls. The few who did reach out offered awkward sympathy but kept their distance, not wanting to be tainted by association. Maya had never felt so alone. She spent her days in her apartment, watching the news and trying not to sink into despair. At night, she lay awake replaying the hostage rescue operation in her mind, trying to figure out where the leak had come from. The sentry who'd spotted the SEAL team approach had sent a warning, but how had Taliban reinforcements been positioned so close to the compound? It was as if they'd known an operation was coming, even if they hadn't known the exact timing. On the 18th day of her suspension, Maya was reviewing the publicly available news reports about the rescue when something caught her attention. An Afghan news outlet had published a story claiming that Taliban sources had known for several days that American forces were planning a rescue operation. The report was vague on details, but it suggested the Taliban had received a warning from a sympathetic source with access to American military planning. Maya pulled out her personal laptop and began searching for more information. She couldn't access classified databases anymore, but there was still plenty of open-source material available. She started piecing together a timeline of events leading up to the rescue. 3 days before the operation, there had been a routine intelligence briefing at CENTCOM headquarters in Florida. The briefing had covered ongoing situations in Afghanistan, including the hostage crisis. Over 50 people had attended that briefing, including several officers from allied nations who were working as liaisons. Maya dug deeper, cross-referencing the attendee list with other information she could find online. One name jumped out at her, a Pakistani liaison officer who'd been recalled to Islamabad 2 days after the rescue operation. The official reason given was family emergency, but the timing seemed suspicious. She continued her research, following digital breadcrumbs across news sites and social media. The Pakistani officer had a brother who worked as a journalist in Peshawar, near the Afghan border. That brother had published several articles that seemed unusually well-informed about Taliban operations. It was all circumstantial, but Maya's instincts were screaming that she was onto something. The problem was that she had no way to verify her suspicions. She had no access to classified systems, no ability to check communications intercepts or intelligence reports. She was just a suspended officer with a personal laptop and a lot of questions. Maya called Captain Morrison and explained what she'd found. "It's interesting," Morrison admitted, "but it's not proof, and even if you're right, it doesn't clear you. The investigation is focused on whether you leaked information, not on whether someone else also leaked information. But if I can prove where the real leak came from—" "You're not an investigator anymore, Commander. You're a suspect. If you start making accusations without solid proof, you'll just make things worse for yourself." Maya hung up feeling frustrated and helpless. She knew she was right about the Pakistani officer, but knowing wasn't enough. She needed proof. The next morning, Maya made a decision that would either save her career or destroy it completely. She'd spent 8 years following the rules, being patient, waiting for recognition that never came. She'd done everything by the book, and it had gotten her nowhere. Now her career was being destroyed by false accusations, and the Navy wasn't going to save her. She needed to save herself. Maya pulled out her phone and made a call she'd been avoiding. The number belonged to her former roommate from the Naval Academy, Sarah Kimball, who now worked as an investigative journalist for a major newspaper. "Maya," Sarah's voice was warm but surprised. "I heard about what happened. I'm so sorry." "Sarah, I need your help, and I need you to keep this conversation off the record for now." "Of course, what's going on?" Maya explained her theory about the Pakistani liaison officer and the real source of the leak. Sarah listened carefully, asking occasional questions. "This is a good lead," Sarah said when Maya finished. "But you're right that it's circumstantial. What you need is documentary evidence or a witness who can confirm the connection." "I can't get that. I don't have access to anything classified anymore." "But I do have access to sources in Pakistan," Sarah said thoughtfully. "Let me make some calls. No promises, but I'll see what I can find." Over the next week, Sarah worked her contacts while Maya waited anxiously. Finally, Sarah called with news. "I found something," Sarah said, excitement in her voice. "The Pakistani liaison officer, Colonel Rashid Malik, has a Swiss bank account that received a deposit of $50,000 2 days before the hostage rescue operation. The money came from an account linked to a Taliban financial network." Maya's heart raced. "That's it, that's the proof." "It's something, but it's not conclusive. We need more context. I'm still digging, but Maya, if this story breaks, it's going to be big. It could damage U.S.-Pakistani relations." "I don't care about politics," Maya said. "I care about the truth." "I know, but you need to be prepared for the fallout. Going public with this could make you a lot of enemies." Maya thought about the last 3 weeks of isolation and suspicion, the whispers and rumors, the destruction of her reputation. She'd already been destroyed in private. Maybe it was time to fight back in public. "Do what you need to do," Maya told Sarah. "I'll deal with the consequences." 3 days later, Sarah's story appeared on the front page of her newspaper. It detailed the suspicious financial transaction, the recalled liaison officer, and raised serious questions about the security of U.S. military planning. The article also mentioned that an unnamed U.S. intelligence officer had been wrongly suspected of leaking information about the operation. The response was immediate and explosive. The Pentagon launched a new investigation into Colonel Malik. The Pakistani government issued angry denials, and the NCIS investigation into Maya was quietly suspended. But Major Harrison wasn't done. That afternoon, Maya received a call from Captain Morrison. "Harrison is furious," Morrison said. "He's claiming you leaked classified information to the press to deflect attention from yourself. He's pushing for you to be court-martialed." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "I didn't leak classified information. Everything Sarah used in her article was open-source material or information she developed independently." Can you prove that? Sarah will testify that I didn't give her any classified information. We were careful. That may not be enough. Harrison is well connected and he's making this personal. He wants you out of the Navy. Maya sat in her apartment after the call ended, feeling the walls closing in. She tried to play by the rules and been destroyed. She tried to fight back and been accused of more crimes. There was no path forward that didn't lead to ruin. Unless she could find a way to prove, conclusively and publicly, that Harrison was wrong about her. And to do that, she needed to find out why he was so determined to destroy her career. Maya spent the next 2 days digging into Major Harrison's background, using the same open-source research techniques she'd employed to investigate the Pakistani liaison officer. What she found surprised her. Harrison had been passed over for promotion to lieutenant colonel twice in the past 3 years. Both times, his efficiency reports had noted his difficulty accepting input from junior personnel and reluctance to credit intelligence analysts for mission success. He was a man who'd built his career on being the smartest person in the room, and he didn't handle challenges to that image well. But there was something else. 3 years ago, Harrison had been the J-2 intelligence officer for a special operations task force in Syria. A mission had gone badly wrong, with 4 soldiers killed in an ambush. The after-action review had been classified, but rumors had circulated that the intelligence package for the mission had been flawed. Maya couldn't access the classified review, but she remembered something from her own research into Syrian operations. She'd been building her communications analysis database around that time, and she'd studied several operations in Syria to understand the patterns. She pulled up her old files, searching through the data she'd compiled years ago. And there it was, a pattern analysis she'd done of a failed operation in 2022. She'd noted at the time that the intelligence appeared to have missed key indicators of enemy activity, but her supervisor had told her not to pursue it further. The operation had been too politically sensitive. Maya cross-referenced the date and location with news reports from Syria. The failed mission matched Harrison's task force. He'd been the intelligence officer responsible for the analysis that had gotten 4 soldiers killed. Suddenly, Harrison's vendetta against her made sense. She represented everything he feared, a junior analyst who could see patterns he'd missed, who could succeed where he'd failed. By destroying her credibility, he was protecting his own reputation and ensuring that no one would look too closely at his past failures. But knowing Harrison's motivation didn't help Maya's current situation. She was still facing possible court-martial, still under suspicion, still fighting to save her career. That afternoon, Maya received an unexpected call from Admiral Hawthorne's office. His aide informed her that the Admiral wanted to meet with her the following morning. No explanation was provided. Maya arrived at the Pentagon the next day with a mixture of hope and dread. She'd been given a temporary security badge that allowed her access to the building, but she felt like an outsider walking through the familiar corridors. Admiral Hawthorne's office was on the 4th floor, with windows overlooking the Potomac River. His aide showed Maya in, and she found the Admiral standing by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Commander Chen," he said without turning, "thank you for coming." "Sir," Maya stood at attention, uncertain what to expect. Hawthorne turned to face her, and Maya was struck by how tired he looked. The lines on his face seemed deeper than they'd been 3 weeks ago. "I owe you an apology," Hawthorne said quietly. "I should have stood up for you when Harrison made his accusations. I let political considerations override my judgment of your character." The admission caught Maya off guard. "Sir, Let me finish." Hawthorne moved to his desk and picked up a file. "The investigation into Colonel Malik has confirmed what your journalist friend reported. He was being paid by Taliban-affiliated networks to provide information about coalition operations. The $50,000 payment was specifically for intelligence about the hostage rescue." Maya felt vindication wash over her, but Hawthorne's expression remained grave. You were right about the leak, and you were wrongly suspected. For that, I apologize. However, there's still the matter of how that information became public. Major Harrison is insisting that you violated security protocols by discussing the case with a civilian journalist. Sir, I never disclosed classified information. Everything in that article was based on open-source material. I believe you, but Harrison is pushing hard for charges, and he has support from some quarters. There are people in this building who don't like being shown up by junior officers, especially when it exposes security failures. Maya felt her hope deflating. So even though I was right, I'm still going to be punished. Hawthorne was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That depends on what happens in the next few hours. I've called a meeting of the senior leadership involved in the hostage rescue operation. You're going to have a chance to present your case directly to them. If you can convince them that you acted appropriately and that Harrison's accusations are baseless, the charges will be dropped. And if I can't convince them, then you'll face a court-martial for unauthorized disclosure of information related to a classified operation. Even if you're eventually cleared, your career will effectively be over." Maya swallowed hard. When is this meeting? 1100 hours, 1 hour from now. Hawthorne's expression softened slightly. I'm giving you a chance to fight for yourself, Commander. Don't waste it. The next hour passed in a blur. Maya returned to her car in the Pentagon parking lot and pulled out her laptop. She had 1 hour to prepare a presentation that would save her career. She thought about everything that had happened over the past 3 weeks. The successful hostage rescue, the false accusations, the investigation that had revealed the real leak, and Harrison's determination to destroy her despite the evidence of her innocence. Then she thought about what Admiral Hawthorne had said about people not liking to be shown up. This wasn't really about security violations or proper procedures. This was about power and ego and the unwillingness of some people to admit when they were wrong. Maya had spent 8 years being quiet, being invisible, accepting whatever scraps of recognition came her way. She'd played by the rules and it had gotten her nowhere. Maybe it was time to stop playing by their rules and start demanding the respect she'd earned. At 1100 hours, Maya walked into the same conference room where this had all begun. The table was full of senior officers, including Admiral Hawthorne, Major Harrison, the SEAL team commander who'd led the rescue, and several others she recognized from the original briefing. Maya took her place at the head of the table, her laptop open in front of her. Her hands were steady, her mind clear. She'd been preparing for this moment her entire career. "Gentlemen," she began, looking directly at each officer in turn. 3 weeks ago, I provided intelligence analysis that led to the successful rescue of 12 American hostages. 4 days ago, investigative journalism confirmed that the security leak Major Harrison accused me of actually came from a Pakistani liaison officer being paid by the Taliban. Today, I'm here to address the accusation that I somehow violated security protocols by helping expose that leak." Harrison leaned forward. "Commander Chen, no one disputes that you provided valuable intelligence, but you had no authority to discuss an ongoing security investigation with a civilian, regardless of your personal relationship with that journalist." "I didn't discuss the investigation," Maya said calmly. "I discussed publicly available information with a friend who happens to be a journalist. The evidence she uncovered came from her own sources, not from me." "Convenient that your friend just happened to investigate the exact same lead you were pursuing," Harrison said sarcastically. Maya turned to face him directly. "Major Harrison, I've spent the last few weeks wondering why you were so determined to destroy my career, so I did some research into your background." Harrison's face darkened. "This is not about me." "Isn't it?" Maya pulled up a document on her laptop, and the wall screen changed to show a timeline. 3 years ago, You were the intelligence officer for a task force operation in Syria. 4 soldiers died because the intelligence package missed key indicators of enemy activity. The after-action review was critical of the intelligence analysis. That operation was classified, Harrison said, his voice tight. You have no business discussing it. The existence of the operation is public record, Maya said. The details are classified, but the fact that it happened is not. And neither is the fact that you've been passed over for promotion twice since then. With reviewers citing your difficulty, accepting input from subordinates. She looked around the table. Major Harrison has made this personal because I represent his failure. I'm a junior analyst who saw patterns he missed, who provided intelligence that saved lives while his intelligence got people killed. He can't accept that, so he's trying to destroy me to protect his own reputation. This is outrageous, Harrison said, standing up. I won't sit here and be accused. Sit down, Major, Admiral Hawthorne said quietly. The authority in his voice was absolute. Harrison sat, his face red with anger. Hawthorne looked at Maya. Commander, those are serious accusations. Can you back them up? Sir, I can provide documentation of everything I've said. Major Harrison's efficiency reports are not classified. His promotion history is not classified. And my analysis of the Syrian operation is based on open-source material and my own research from 3 years ago. She advanced to the next slide on her presentation. But more importantly, I can prove that my friendship with Sarah Kimball had nothing to do with unauthorized disclosure. Here are the phone records showing our communications. Here are Sarah's notes from her investigation, which she's willing to provide under oath. And here is a timeline showing that she began investigating Colonel Malik 2 days before I even mentioned my theory to her. Maya looked around the table. I have done nothing wrong. I provided excellent intelligence that saved lives. I was falsely accused of being a traitor, and when I used legal, appropriate means to help clear my name, I was accused of more violations. This has nothing to do with security and everything to do with a senior officer who can't accept that a junior analyst is better at intelligence work than he is. The room was silent. Maya could see the officers processing what she'd said, weighing the evidence, making their calculations. Finally, Commander Ellis, the SEAL team leader, spoke up via video link. Admiral, if I may, Commander Chen's intelligence saved my team and those hostages. In my 20 years of special operations, I've worked with a lot of intelligence analysts. She's one of the best I've seen. If the question is whether we trust her judgment and her integrity, my answer is yes, absolutely. Another officer spoke up. I've reviewed the NCIS investigation file. There's no evidence that Commander Chen disclosed classified information. The entire case against her is based on suspicion and coincidence. Admiral Hawthorne looked at Harrison. Major, do you have any actual evidence that Commander Chen violated security protocols? Not theories, not suspicions, evidence. Harrison's jaw worked, but no words came out. Finally, he said, "No, sir, but the appearance of impropriety is not the same as actual impropriety," Hawthorne finished. Commander Chen, you're reinstated to full duty effective immediately. Your security clearance is restored and no charges will be filed. This matter is closed. Maya felt relief flood through her, but Hawthorne wasn't done. Major Harrison, you're removed from any further involvement in this case. I'm also recommending that you undergo a professional development review to address the issues Commander Chen has raised about your leadership style. Harrison looked like he'd been slapped. Sir, I dismissed, Major. Harrison stood and left the room, his shoulders stiff with barely controlled rage. Maya knew she'd made an enemy for life, but she no longer cared. She'd won. As the other officers filed out, offering her quiet congratulations, Admiral Hawthorne gestured for Maya to remain. That was quite a performance, Commander, he said when they were alone. You've got steel in your spine. Thank you, sir. but you've also made yourself some enemies. Not everyone appreciates having their failures exposed, even when they deserve it. I understand, sir, but I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of doing excellent work and watching other people take credit for it while I get blamed for their mistakes. Hawthorne nodded slowly. I respect that, and I think it's time we put your talents to better use. He pulled out a folder and handed it to her. I'm putting together a new intelligence task force focused on advanced pattern analysis and predictive modeling. I want you to lead it. Maya opened the folder, her eyes widening as she read the details. It was everything she'd ever wanted: authority, resources, and the chance to do the kind of deep analytical work she excelled at. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say yes, and then prove to everyone that my faith in you is justified. 6 months later, Maya stood in the same Pentagon briefing room where her ordeal had begun, but this time, everything was different. The wall screen displayed her team's latest intelligence analysis, a comprehensive assessment of emerging threats in the South China Sea. 20 senior officers sat around the table, but now they were listening to her with respect and attention. Maya's new task force had quickly established itself as one of the most effective intelligence units in the Navy. Using advanced pattern analysis and the same instinctive understanding of communications intercepts that had saved the hostages in Afghanistan, her team had provided critical intelligence for 3 major operations. The word was spreading through the Pentagon. If you wanted good intelligence, you went to Commander Chen's team. But success had brought new challenges. Maya's visibility made her a target for those who resented her rapid rise. Major Harrison, though removed from direct involvement in her work, had continued to spread rumors and undermine her when he could. She'd learned to ignore it, focusing on the work and the results. Today's briefing was particularly important. The Chief of Naval Operations himself was in attendance, along with representatives from the other services and the intelligence community. Maya's team had identified what they believed was a coordinated Chinese effort to establish military outposts on disputed islands, and the implications were significant. The pattern we're seeing matches the signature of previous Chinese expansion operations, Maya explained, walking them through the communications intercepts and satellite imagery. Based on our analysis, we believe they'll begin moving construction equipment to 3 specific locations within the next 2 weeks. A Marine Corps general leaned forward. How confident are you in this assessment, Commander? Maya didn't hesitate. 87%, sir. The communications pattern is consistent, the logistics timeline makes sense, and the preliminary activity we're seeing on the ground supports the conclusion. And if you're wrong, then we'll have positioned naval assets for a contingency that didn't materialize, sir. But if I'm right and we don't act, we'll be responding to a fait accompli instead of shaping the situation proactively. The CNO spoke up. Admiral Hawthorne, you've worked with Commander Chen before. What's your assessment? Hawthorne, who'd been quietly observing from the side of the room, smiled slightly. Sir, 6 months ago, Commander Chen told me 12 hostages were in a specific compound in Afghanistan. She was right, and her analysis saved lives. 3 months ago, she predicted a Taliban offensive in Helmand province down to the week it began. She was right again. I've learned to trust her judgment. The CNO nodded. Very well. We'll position assets based on Commander Chen's analysis. But Commander, I want daily updates as the situation develops.